Hey guys, welcome to our channel, Foghorn 5. Are you having trouble removing your MWS trigger box, or do you need to remove it? Well, today we're going to be getting into removing our trigger box, disassembly of all of our parts, lubrication, reassembly, and putting it back in our receiver and making sure everything's functional. Well, the first thing that I'll do is I'll show you all the tools that we're using. We got a smaller Phillips screwdriver, a modified flathead, another flathead just in case I need it. We have a couple different hook tools, some needle nose pliers, got a toothbrush, tongue sticks, got some Q-tips, got our super lube, isopropyl alcohol at 70%, an Allen key set, it's metric, 2 punches, 2 sacrificial Allen keys, an 8-ounce hammer, a 16-ounce, and a non-dead blow mallet. Lastly, I have an in and out bin to put all parts in there, and then also a cup to put some alcohol in, and that way I could wash the parts in there. So here's my CQBR block 2. We'll go ahead and take the upper off the lower. So first off, we'll make sure it's clear. Pop our receiver pins out. Kind of get our thumb in there. We'll set the upper aside. 5 things you're going to want to remove: magazine release, trigger pin right here, safety selector, Phillips screw in the top of the receiver that holds the trigger box in the lower receiver. We don't want to leave that in because that'll be a huge mistake. Lastly, we also have to push this pin out so we can move the trigger guard out of the way. We're going to pop out our magazine release. And what I'll usually do is I'll take a Phillips, push that out, kind of hold it in place, just unscrew it. Yeah, basically just take a Phillips or something like that to push the magazine release out. Tighten that back up. Just make sure it's together, put it in our bin, and just so we don't forget, and we already have our Phillips in hand, we're going to take this screw out. This is a smaller Phillips head screw that we want to unscrew that holds the trigger box in the lower receiver. So we'll just take that screw, dump it in our bin. We're going to take our safety selector off. I have an ambi safety selector, so I have a little Allen key on this side that I need to remove. You won't have this, but the concept of taking your safety selector out is the same. So I'll take this and the screw, dump it in my bin, and what we want to do is I want to rack it, twist and push on the other side. Comes out around the 45 position. So we'll just twist, keep twisting, and then it should come out nice and easy. Now we want to punch out this pin. Now the order that we do this does not really matter. So I have my little pin punch, and it goes this way. Left side of the receiver, out the right side. Light taps, don't have to brute force it. And I'll take my needle nose pliers to pull out the rest. I'll take this pin, dump it in our bin, no rhyme intended. Our trigger box is free and clear from the lower. The last thing we'll do is we'll take a little pin punch, push this spring-loaded pin on our trigger guard, and swing it out of the way because we do need to get behind the trigger. This is really the most annoying part about owning an MWS, is taking the trigger box out. I'll close my receiver pins so they're out of the way. Now we're going to start wailing away with our little modified flathead, and we want to get this behind the trigger in order to start hammering down on it. If you're worried about scratching up your trigger, it's inevitable. There's a little space behind the trigger, and we're just going to basically put our flathead there, and we'll take our 8-ounce hammer right now and start hammering away. Some trigger boxes are easier to get out than others, some are harder, so we'll just keep tapping away. I can feel mine already coming out, which is really nice. Normally the first time you do it, it is impossible. The one thing that we want to do is make sure this comes out straight. In conjunction with hitting behind the trigger here, there's a little bit of a space where you could hit the wall of the trigger box itself. Basically make sure this comes out evenly. Mine's coming out really easy, but yours will definitely be harder to do, especially if it's the first time. Basically hit behind the trigger and right here. Usually it's easier to go this way. Kind of hold it like this. If it doesn't come out straight, your bolt catch will get seized, and you don't want to necessarily make it go this way when you're pushing it out. Yeah, mine's coming out unevenly. There's also another space that we could get into. Up in here, you could kind of see where the trigger box meets in the lower receiver. But we could take a little flathead or something and kind of pry upwards and go from underneath and try to get it out even. Once you could kind of get in there, you could kind of pry that up too. There's a million ways to do this. It's really freaking hard. Once you've done it a couple times to your MWS, it'll be really easy. The Z plate is coming out. We kind of want to keep our bolt release off the table, so put some pressure on your grip as you're hitting this down. Even put it on a surface where things could fall into it, if that makes sense. Let's see if I can pull it out. Nope, not yet. Yeah, it's coming out at an angle, so I might need to push it back in a bit. Oh, this is why it was coming out at an angle. You have to pull out your rear receiver pin. Sorry about that. There we go. Now our trigger box is out. Mine was really easy to get out. So we'll go ahead and set aside our receiver. Take my Z plate, put it in here. Now in my particular case, I have a Guns Modify trigger box. All the components inside the trigger box are stock, other than this Geisley trigger from BJ Tac. As you can see, kind of marred up the back of this trigger, which upsets me a little bit from taking it out like once or twice. So we basically want to get this apart. Mine will have Allen keys and yours will probably have Phillips head screws. Our first course of action is we want to get all these screws out. Some of them are longer than others, just keep that in mind. I'll go ahead and put this screw here. Set this one aside. This one is the one that goes on the very right. It's a little bit longer. Now, the reason I have a Guns Modify trigger box is I accidentally forgot to take out the rear Phillips head screw and I munched it to all hell, so I needed to get a new one. I ended up breaking the area where the bolt release catch sits on and I had to get a replacement. We'll go ahead and set aside this screw. That one's a little bit shorter, so that one goes up top, so I'll just make sure I have that oriented that way. We'll go ahead and take our bolt release out. Be careful, the spring might come loose. And we'll set this bad boy aside. I'm basically cleaning this trigger box because Justin went ahead and double fed my gun and there's chunks of BBs inside the trigger box right now, so I gotta go ahead and clean all that. A good thing to have when you're working on assemblies with a bunch of springs is throw everything into a bag. That way you're not gonna lose your springs. So I'll go ahead and pry this trigger box apart now that I have the screws out. And we have one half off. The spring came out. I'll put it back where it goes just so you guys could see me take it apart. We'll set aside this side for now. We got to disassemble a couple parts on here. So this is one half of our trigger box. Basically all we got to do is start tearing things out of this. Normally I do it in the bag, but for the videos purposes, I'm not going to do it in the bag so you guys could actually see what I'm doing. Our first part that we want to take out is this rear trigger sear and the springs along with it. I'll take my needle nose and grab that spring so I don't lose it. Go ahead and pull this sear off. And then there's another spring back here and we're going to want to take this one off. Kind of compress the spring a little bit when you pull it out so it doesn't fly. And then I will put this spring just inside the hole for now so that I know that's the spring that goes with that one, and same with this one. I'll go ahead and set these guys aside. The next part we're going to want to take out is this little spring right here. Basically we want to take our needle nose and compress the left side by pushing it this way. Make sure you have a firm hold on it because this one will freaking fly and you'll lose it forever. And then we'll take this hammer bar out, whatever you call it, and set it aside. I like to kind of keep the parts together just so I know how the assembly goes back together. Next thing we'll take out is our trigger, and this little pin basically gets held on in this little hole right here. So now our trigger's out, we'll disassemble the trigger as well. This little guy will fall out from here, and we'll set this aside as well. Basically, you want to hold onto this spring as you pull this silver piece off. This circular pin, kind of pull it out with your hand. There's a spring right here, so make sure that doesn't fly. We'll put those all together. There we go. We have our whole trigger unit completely disassembled. Now here's the tricky part. There's a spring in here that holds this hammer unit in. We want to push down on it so it doesn't fly, just to be sure. And we'll set this aside, put these together, and we have one half of our trigger box completely disassembled. We don't have to take out any of these pins or anything like that. That's all good. Next thing we'll do, take the other half of the trigger box and we'll pop out this pin and this other pin as well. These are sprung loaded, so be very careful. Put a finger on it, kind of pop this out of its little area and carefully grab that and set that aside. We'll push this guy out by pushing it on the other side, and we'll keep a hold on this little bar here, and it should do that. So we got this out, set this aside, and then we'll grab that guy without bending the spring. We'll kind of just pull it out. There's a little washer right here. We don't want to lose that, so we'll set this aside as well. So now both of our trigger box halves are completely disassembled. Now that I'm here, it's not as dirty as I thought it was, but we'll go ahead and clean it. I'll take my cup that I have. This is for parts, so I could kind of wash them in alcohol, and that way I'm not spilling alcohol all over the place. So I'll take my rag, We'll just clean all the machine oil off of this. Pretend this is the first time you've done it. We're gonna clean it as such. Take our Q-tips, get up in there. Just kind of clean every little surface in here, every little feature. Same with here. Take my rag again, kind of give it a rough cleaning. I'll go ahead and clean every little surface. Just kind of get these last little areas that have some lubricant in them. This is the last little area that I'll clean. Right in here where this little trigger bar or the hammer slides into. Get that nice and clean. Now the two halves are very clean. We'll set these aside and we'll start cleaning all of our other parts. So we'll throw our part in there, just give it a little wash, pull it out. This is one of the sears or whatever. Take my rag and just dry it off. Same thing with the spring. We'll keep those guys together. That guy's pretty clean now. One thing I forgot on our disassembly is this roller right here. Has a little pin that we could push out with an Allen key or something. Should come out really easy. That way we could clean it. Go ahead and clean that. Same with this guy. Basically, we just want to soak everything a little bit with alcohol. That way we get all the nasty gunk off of it. I'll set these aside. Okay, so I'll take my hammer and the little spring associated and just clean that. And then these guys right here. You guys kind of make your own method for remembering which parts are which and where they go. It's kind of hard to keep track, so I just keep everything where they're oriented in my little bin. And then our bolt catch, remove the spring, give it a little wash. Doesn't have to be too crazy on this one. I'll wipe it down, and I'll put the spring back on and set that aside. Now, jumping into cleaning all the trigger components, I'll go ahead and throw these all in. These are all the components for just the trigger. If you want, you can clean your springs. It doesn't really matter unless they're like gunked up with a lot of dirt. So now we have our trigger clean, but we got to clean the trigger itself as well. This is BJ Tack's Geisley trigger, super cool. I don't think you can find these much anymore. I think BJ Tack is out of business, unfortunately. Last thing that I got to clean is my safety selector. As you can see, there's a chunk of a BB right in there. And I'll go ahead and just clear that out. No wonder it wasn't functioning right. Yeah. Same thing for the other side. Take a Q-tip, get up in here, in these little slots and grooves. And I'll just go ahead and put the screw back in there and set that aside. Now we have everything cleaned and disassembled. Next thing we're gonna get into is lubricating and reassembly. I basically have everything kind of grouped in where it should go. Basically everything that goes on this half and then everything that goes on this side will be here. The only thing I don't have out are the screws that keep everything together. So I'm just setting those aside for the time being. I'll go ahead and just start lubricating everything that needs to be lubed. For lube, I'm using multi-purpose synthetic grease. Part number is 21030. So what I've done is I've just taken a little square cardboard, just put some of the super lube on there so I'm not wasteful. And we'll go ahead and start lubricating. Take a Q-tip, get a little bit on there, you don't need a lot. The question is where to start. Anywhere you see wear patterns is where you want to lubricate. And anywhere there's any contact, go ahead and lubricate those areas. If you see any burrs or feel any burrs on any of your parts, it's a good idea to take a really high grit sandpaper and get those off and lubricate on the inside as well. Then you kind of wipe off the rest with your finger. You know, a little goes a long way. I just kind of use my fingers to wipe off any excess. It keeps everything nice and slick still. Go ahead and take this guy and lubricate any contact areas, kind of wipe it off. Yeah, you're gonna get your hands dirty doing this. So you can wear gloves if you want. So basically the roller assembly, I'm gonna put that back together. Now that it's lubricated, it should be very slick. This you could always lubricate while it's in the gun too. So I'll go ahead and set that aside. So I'll go ahead and get my bolt catch and lubricate this guy as well. Anywhere I see wear, I'm just going for that. You don't wanna overdo it. And then I'll just kind of take my finger and kind of thin it out a little bit. Set that aside. And then here we have our hammer. This is like the hammer that actually hits the valve on the magazine. Lube up the sidewalls because I know this is gonna be contacting the side of the trigger box itself. Take that and its spring and set it aside again. And then we'll take our trigger components, get that lubed up too. And I have a little bit too much there, but I'll just wipe it around and spread it with my fingers. and I'll set that aside. Here's our next piece of the trigger itself, and I'll go ahead and lube the sidewalls and anywhere that there's going to be some sort of contact. I'll set that aside. And here's the pin with a hole for the trigger itself. We'll go ahead and get that lubricated as well. Set that aside. Our springs, since my hands are already lubed, that's perfect. And then our trigger itself, you might need to get something a little bit thinner. Tongue sticks, get up in there. Coat everything that needs to be coated, and any excess I'll remove when I put it back together. That's a lot easier to do, because then you can see where there's going to be no wear whatsoever. Now we have everything lubricated other than the shells for the trigger box itself, and then we also have our ZET plate. We'll kind of give a small amount of lubrication on there. We don't really need a lot. We don't want this thing to pick up a lot of dirt, kind of be light with it. This is for the other side of the trigger box. We'll just kind of get a light amount of lube on there, set that aside. Take this guy, lube that too, set that aside. If you want, you could hit this with a little bit of lube. This doesn't do a lot of movement. We could lubricate it just in case. Set that aside. Take this guy, lubricate this as well, set that aside. Next thing we'll do, we'll get the halves of our trigger boxes nice and lubricated as well. I know there's going to be some contact on this sidewall right here and in this little feature, this little pocket feature in here. So I'm going to go ahead and get in there. Get the sidewall, get up in here for the spring, and then we need some on the sidewall here because that roller unit is going to be contacting that. Do a little bit of lube in here for a bolt catch, just a tiny amount, we don't need a lot. And also on this bottom ledge right here, hit a little bit of our magazine release area, and I'm trying to apply it very thin. I'm not trying to go crazy. This little ledge right here, you could hit that a little bit. So now this side of the trigger box is completely lubricated where it needs to be. Yeah, and it's also a good idea to kind of lubricate the outer sidewall so that when you are removing it or putting it back in, it's a little bit easier. And we'll do the other half of the trigger box, get some lube in this area and right in here for the hole. Anywhere there's holes you want to kind of lubricate as well. Kind of on the sidewall, kind of dab some here and there. So yeah, we basically have everything lubricated that we need to lubricate. Now we're going to get everything back together. We will start with these two guys right here. Don't forget their springs. And we're basically going to put this one on the back, and then you'll take it with your finger and kind of push it in. Make sure that's pressed in there. Don't want to bend it, so kind of be easy with it. And then we'll take this other one. This one has a locator pin. And you'll take that spring and compress it a little bit and push it up against the sidewall right there. Now you just check the function real quick. Now be careful, don't lose those springs. Now we'll do our trigger. We have this guy here. You'll take the larger spring that goes with the trigger unit, drop it in that little hole right there, compress it, get the little circular pin, push that through. Now that won't, fly off. And then we'll take this other side and we'll take the spring, compress it a little bit, and we are reassembled here. Then we have our roller hammer area, and we'll take this and the spring associated, and I'll drop this spring in here because this is the hardest part. Yeah, we'll drop that in there. We'll take our needle nose. We somehow got to compress this spring here on the back side and twist it. I'm just gonna hold it from the back and push that down. Now it should be straight and flush in there. If it's unaligned, you could just kind of push it right here with your needle nose pliers. One thing I forgot to put in was this little guy right here. We'll flip this on its side. We could take this one out for now, just so it's kind of out of the way and it doesn't fly. I have to take this side of that and put that there. Hold it down as I put it down back on the table. Yeah, now we could put this back on. So now our trigger is back in. We're going to take this little hammer assembly and we're going to drop it in here. Get this spring in here. And this spring has a little hook. That hook side will go hook around the pinhole itself. Slide the longer leg in this little hammer unit. And then we want to take this hooked part, push it with our finger, and slide that guy around. That's pretty much it for this side of the trigger box. Now we're going to start assembling this side. So we'll take this guy right here, drop that in there, and then we'll take this pin with the larger pin with the spring, and we'll put it spring side on the left and pin side on the right, and we'll give it a push. Bit of a pain to do. Yep, push it in there, Now it should be secure. So we'll take this pin. The pin side is going to be on the left, spring side is on the right, and push it in, and that should be good. Now we'll take this little washer type thing and put it right in here. So now we have both sides of our trigger box assembled. We'll take them and put them together. Now we'll clasp both sides together. Before I screw everything together, check the function of everything, kind of squeeze it together, and so you gotta rack that, click that down, pull your trigger. Yeah, so we are good. We'll get our screws in. I believe my medium one goes here. It doesn't have to be super tight. I believe the long one goes here on the right, and then we'll get this last one in. Now we have the screws in. So now we'll take our bolt catch and the spring associated with the bolt catch, pop the spring on there, compress it a little bit. Yeah, you kind of just got to feed the spring into that little hole. And now our bolt catch is on. Next thing we'll do is we'll take our Z plate and place it on the other side. You kind of got to grab the bolt catch and press it in a little bit, and then now our bolt catch is on here. Now everything's together. This is our complete trigger box. Now we'll take our receiver and we'll start assembling. Now I have my lower, and what we'll do, slide the trigger unit back in. And you can kind of push it on both sides. One thing you want to do is you want to rack the trigger unit on newer guns that are harder to work on. Take a wood block, put it right here, hammer on that wood block. That'll usually kind of even out how much force is going down. So once we've kind of pushed it in, we want to make sure our Z plate is in there. And then we'll push it the rest of the way in. Your trigger box should be in. Pop this pin back in. One side of the pin has a little bit of a cutout. That cutout side is going to go on the right side. Push the pin in through the right. All right. Take that screw, kind of drop it in there. And it's good to probably replace that with an Allen. That'll make your life a lot easier and you won't strip it. So yeah, let's snug on there. Put our safety selector in. Get over the little trigger bar in there. Take like a flathead to push that pin in. And once we push it in, we can push our safety selector all the way in. I'll screw on my right side. I gotta just make sure my safety is nice and snug. We'll get our magazine release in. So we'll put this side in first. Drop the spring down in there. Screw this on. Push it as far out as you can. Should be pretty much even with the textured feature of the magazine release, and then you're good. Please make sure your bolt carrier and charging handle are in your upper, otherwise you're gonna have a bitch of a time getting that out. So check our reset. Nice and crispy. Hopefully this helped you guys, and I'm hoping that you could have seen everything. I couldn't really see what I was doing because the camera was overhead. Hopefully it'll give you guys an idea of what to do. Let me know if you have any questions. Hit me up in the comments. Hit us up on our Instagram, Foghorn5. I'm more than willing to help you guys out with your MWS rifles. I'm pretty keen on them and I know them pretty well. New MWSs are really hard to get the trigger box out, so I'll certainly do a video on that. Mine was super easy to get out. Also in the future, I do want to do a video on disassembling the bolt carrier. But yeah, basically that's about it. Thank you guys for watching. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, and have a good rest of your day. Thanks.